What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Bunny Operator here. Welcome back to Inside the Industry. This is episode 7 featuring a very awesome guest. We have Jon Park, aka Kimchi Seal on Instagram. If you don't know Jon, he's a former ROK SEAL. If you're not familiar with ROK, that's Republic of Korea, aka South Korea. And SEAL being, was it Sea Air Land? That's the Korean, South Korean equivalent of the U.S. versions of special forces, or not special forces, excuse me, of special teams within their Navy units. But without further ado, Jon, I'll let you go ahead and talk about yourself. Go ahead.
There's not much to talk about. I am a former Korean SEAL. I only served about 5 years, so there's not much to boast about. Not that I want to boast about anything. And you know, with my limited time, I started a YouTube channel in South Korea. It was a tactical channel called Redcell. I don't know if some of your viewers are familiar with it, but it was definitely popular amongst Korean Americans and Asian Americans in the US. I was just at SIG Freedom Days, and a couple of people kind of recognized me, which was kind of interesting because I'm used to being somewhat recognized within the industry in South Korea, but in the US it was kind of really weird because you're having people come up, or I'm having people come up to me talking in English, which again, like I grew up in the States, so I'm semi-fluent or fluent, whichever way you want to look at it. I mean, the audience can judge for themselves, but yeah, people are coming up and telling me that they knew who I was. They saw the collaboration I did with Fieldcraft, so yeah, it was really cool. Now I work at Fieldcraft, which is really interesting. I'm the media director currently, so I'm the man behind the camera, sometimes in front of the camera, but yeah, I'm mostly behind the camera, and that's where I prefer to be actually, despite having owned a YouTube channel.
Nice. I do remember that in the one of the videos with GBRS, I think it was Mike made a comment towards you in the camera, I think it was. I particularly remember that. I do remember the Redcell videos featuring Fieldcraft. I mean, those are pretty cool, especially because they were done in English, and Redcell being primarily Korean based, right? And a lot of the text is in Korean too. But I'm watching, I was like, oh, they're speaking in English, and it's Mike. And then, well, come find out, you know, speaking with you, well, it's you. So for the viewers who aren't sure about that, like how did you, or the dynamic between Koreans and your requirement to serve for the Korean military, even though you were raised in the United States?
So I immigrated to the US when I was 8 years old. I grew up in New Jersey. I moved around a lot, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds because it does get complicated, but essentially my parents, or my mom, because my dad was still living in South Korea, they were happily married, but they were separated. My dad owned a business in South Korea, and my mom was raising me and my brother, my older brother, in the US, and she applied for our green card. And then 9/11 happened, and then that became a, can I curse on this?
Yeah,
that became a shit. Yeah, that became a shit. By all means, man. Yeah. So essentially, that created a logistical nightmare for me, and I just decided to leave the U.S. because I didn't want to be an illegal immigrant, essentially. Now I'm married to a U.S. citizen, so yeah, that's all clear. That's how I'm able to live in the U.S. But at the time, yeah, that was a big heartbreak for me because I wanted to serve in the U.S. military, but I couldn't do that. So the only logical route for me in order to serve was to serve in the Korean military. And I was a Korean citizen. I was born in Korea. I grew up until I was 8. I was semi-fluent in Korean because when I moved to the US, even though I grew up in New Jersey where there's a huge Asian population, I actually grew up in a predominantly Caucasian town. So yeah, my English kind of shot through the roof. and I was able to pick it up very quickly. And my Korean sort of kind of dwindled. And I moved back to South Korea when I was 20 years old.
Oh, wow.
For college and then the military. That allowed me to kind of catch up on my Korean language so that I can adjust semi well in the South Korean military.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty interesting too. I do notice that a lot of my Korean friends who have either that I don't want to say dual citizenship, but they have green cards, but they are still technically Korean citizens, and they've gone back to serve and have come back too. There's that obligation, but yours is not exactly a typical scenario given the situation that happened. So that's pretty interesting. Well, given that experience, you're talking about you're growing up in a predominantly white area, and I know that there is a Korean population in New Jersey, I found that out recently from one of my other friends. I was like, what? Koreans in New Jersey?
There's a lot.
But yeah, apparently there is. So I mean, did you have any hurdles growing up, considering that you were also an immigrant at the time too? Your barriers that you experienced, your identity and such. Go ahead and talk about that if you can.
Yeah, of course. There definitely was, but not in the way that most people would portray it. And I always advocate for a deeper understanding when it comes to the racial tensions that Asian Americans feel, because having moved when I was 8 years old, of course I've kind of, I couldn't talk in English, so maybe I didn't understand half the stuff. If there were insults, maybe I didn't understand half the stuff that they were saying. But as kids, you kind of generally understand. You get the vibe, and it's not difficult to see whether a fellow classmate is making fun of you or not. Obviously, because they're laughing and pointing at you.
Right.
So I've had those instances, but having looking back on it now, I associate that with kids being kids more so than actual racism. And there were other instances, maybe in middle and high school, where it had racial undertones. But even then, I still equate it to ignorance and just people being people and jerks being jerks.
Right.
So I never wanted to see myself as a victim of any sort of racial attacks or what have you, because it wasn't as bad as some other cases that I've heard. I never got beat up for being Asian, and there are some Asian undertone jokes, like not being able to drive, having a small penis, or whatever. But I've realized actually joining in on the joke and being able to laugh at the joke with the people, not because I'm less Asian or I'm not proud of my Asian heritage, but if it's kind of like the movie 8 Mile, when Eminem starts accepting the fact that these guys are making fun of him, and he's able to kind of own it and turn it back on them.
Yeah,
I realized if I join in on the fun, I can actually connect with these people without having to degrade my heritage. So I would make fun of myself and then make fun of them back, and that allowed me to actually assimilate into the culture naturally. So that's essentially it. I do have certain instances where I did get into fights because of certain racial slurs, like chink or gook or whatever.
Right. Like intentionally derogatory, not just in a buddy joking, like schoolyard teasing kind of way, right?
Yeah. Right. But I also equate that to guys trying to, overtly show their bravado to their male friends, not them trying to be racist or actually being racist. So I try to read between the lines in terms of that. And I do want to empower certain Asian Americans that feel like they're victims of racial attacks when essentially it's just people being people. Not to say there isn't racism. Of course, there's racism, and there's racist people. But I do want to help people read between the lines.
Sure. Yeah, it's not always so black and white, right? There's usually a lot more to it. And it's multifaceted and very dynamic the way that social behaviors work.
Yeah.
And, and unfortunately, sometimes as a society, we're a little too offended, I want to say, that or thin-skinned to the point that you can't see past certain things. Like, everybody does it, right? We all say things, including racial things, especially to others or to our own like friends or peers, to people that we kind of know, and some of them are pretty damn fucked up things to say, but it's kind of like it just goes with the game, really. And some people might take that as whatever the buzz term is for these things, but I think that's just being a little too thin-skinned, and you're just not being a human, if you will, right? It's just not being, you're just not communicating effectively at that point. No, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So for the most part too, you've grown basically your entire childhood in America, less your very young years, but as far as your developmental years were in America, and you became an adult and then went to Korea, and then had to experience Korea as a young adult. So that's kind of like equivalent to American kids growing up here and then moving to a foreign country to try to readapt over there. So how was that side for you when you arrived back home?
Honestly, it sucked. I feel like I faced more discrimination in South Korea than in the US, which is weird. And it's weird to think because we're the same color, but with that different culture and not being able to speak Korean ultra fluently, because they can right off the bat tell that I grew up in the US. But I made a conscious effort to learn Korean to the point where they weren't able to tell. So I worked on my diction and pronunciation and intonation in order to speak like a native Korean. And I got to that point where people weren't able to tell, but it was a double-edged sword for sure, because not that I wanted to overtly tell them that I grew up in the US to gain certain perks, because there are certain Korean Americans that do that in Korea.
Right.
But they would essentially assume that I'm a stupid Korean because I don't understand certain Korean words when I speak fluently. So it was a double-edged sword. But ultimately it became an advantage because I can speak 2 languages pretty fluently.
I see. Yeah, that must have been a pretty interesting, I guess, shift in culture, because you have to not only understand Korean formal culture, but also Korean street culture, especially you being a young adult.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, how many years did it take for you before you decided to join the military after that?
So it was 5 years. It took 5 years.
So you were probably about 25
working. Yeah.
Interesting. Because then you had to learn that aspect of it too.
Yeah.
I would think that actually, unless they weren't able to tell, but I mean, were they able to tell that you're a more Americanized Korean in the military? And if so, was there any type of prejudice in there for you in the military?
There definitely was, because I'm sure, if your audience or even yourself heard any stories about selection programs, whether it's the Q course or BUDS or any other selection in other branches, you don't want to stand out. And once word gets out that you speak English fluently and you grew up in the US, there's a target on your back. So all the cadre would kind of, swarm. They'll remember my name or my number, because for us, we get attached a number and you don't have a name for that period of time. And it was kind of tough, because I get extra punishment because I'm more visible to them, and they remember who I am, and they're always keeping record of how I'm performing. Whereas the quote unquote gray man would essentially be invisible to the cadre and kind of float through the program, not with ease, but relative ease.
Right. At that point, it's not as easy to stand out, if you will.
Right.
In your case, it's not your fault that you stood out.
Right.
So that's interesting. So how far along in your naval career did you decide to sign up for teams or for selection?
So
or actually, maybe perhaps you can explain to the audience what that transition is in the South Korean Navy versus the US, if you know.
So, I mean, obviously, your audience being English speaking, I'll do the U.S. equivalent. So I became a candidate off the street, meaning I had a contract going in.
Oh, I see.
But I essentially wasn't able to make it the first try and the second try, and I made it on the third try. And we don't have a rollback program like U.S. Navy SEALs, where they have a rollback program. If you fail at a certain point, you get rolled back and start over from that point, or depending on the case and how they perform, they get rolled back to the beginning. In my case, I had to wait a full year to make it back onto training because there was no rollback programs. So I essentially went back to the fleet. Had to kind of train myself back up again. And, I won't go into the details of why. I mean, I can if you're going to ask that question, but essentially the first one was due to an injury and I got surgery for it. And then the second time, it was during Hell Week, I got hypothermia and I got knocked out for, I think, about 6 hours, and you're not supposed to miss more than 4 hours within Hell Week.
I see.
Otherwise, you're cut from the program.
Yeah, that's tough, man. And those are hardliners. They're hardline. Well, especially the injury, but yeah, as far as the between the 4 and 6 hours, those are fortunately hardliners. So I think that anyone going through any type of government process understands that, because there has to be a line that's drawn.
Yeah, for sure.
It sucks, but it is what it is. But hey, you powered through the third time, and you made it through. So I mean, it shows the tenacity, because it sucks to have to go through all that again, really. Especially through Hell Week, man. That's pretty much like you're seeing that home stretch, and then unfortunately hypothermia. That sucks, man. Okay, so you did how many years? And
a little less than 5 years. So
5 years on. Wow, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I won't ask you to divulge on the things you've done, but I imagine that you got to do and experience quite a bit when you were out there.
Not to interrupt, but my career is not extensive at all. And if anything, just to give a backdrop for your audience, the Korean military, we see very little combat, right? If any. That's not because the guys aren't motivated. That's because of the structure of the Korean military and where we're strategically placed or strategically not placed. And within Asian culture, we're very risk averse. So, putting guys in harm's way without a clear justification isn't gonna fly. So even though we have a lot of motivated guys that want to go into combat, it just isn't there. Aside from that, even within the Korean SEAL community, my career is nothing extravagant at all. And I'm not trying to be humble. That's just me trying to be forthright about my experience. My case was interesting because, as you can imagine, if I speak English fluently, command wants to utilize me in the best way possible.
Right.
So even though I, overtly asked them to put me into the teams without giving me any special opportunities, they, right off the bat, they put me into a joint training exercise with U.S. Navy SEALs, so that I can kind of build up that relationship and be able to be in the forefront of sharing knowledge between two different units,
right?
Which was super beneficial to me because I was learning constantly, because I'm literally the filter that's translating all the information coming from the U.S. SEAL the U.S. SEALs, and yeah, that just allowed me to grow exponentially. But my peers would view that as special treatment, and I never felt I for sure wasn't entitled to it, and two, I never felt comfortable being within that position. But within the military, it's the needs of the military, not the needs for yourself.
As with all things government related.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, that you have to actually feel that, or at least feel that negativity from your peers. That's unfortunate, at least the perception that you were getting special treatment. So I would take it that the majority of your firearms background comes from the military side, and yes. Or at least because I imagine you weren't old enough to be around firearms technically when you were here. I guess you would have been able to do long guns, but I don't think that you would have gotten that opportunity very much out there, right? So that's interesting. So your majority of your firearms training was through the military, and then you get out of the military, then you come back to America. Is that what happened? Or
so I get out, I run my own media company, and then through that media company I created that YouTube channel called Redcell. And that's where I started Redcell essentially to be a siphon of information from U.S. special operations and the U.S. military in general, and even the civilian sector, because there's a lot for the civilian sector to offer as well, and just siphon that information to Koreans, because there's a lot of misinformation in Korea, not because Koreans are stupid, but because there's a lot that gets lost in translation.
Sure.
That just naturally happens, and people are, even active duty military guys are searching information online, and there's a lot of misinformation straight off the bat in English. And if you're trying to translate misinformation, it just becomes a bigger piece of misinformation, and it just wasn't. I just wasn't happy about it, because if it came to a point where we were able to utilize the tactics, SOPs, TTPs that we had, if there was any mishap, that's lives that are on the line. And I wanted to be that bridge for the Korean military, and I was successfully doing that. But at the same time, I won't get into the details of this, but it just became all about being a YouTube star, because there were a lot of I won't say copycats, but there were a lot of people that were emulating or kind of having that second mover advantage of Sure. starting different special operations YouTube channels or what have you, which literally started a military boom in South Korea right now, where there's a lot of TV shows around special operations and the military in general. And it became about stardom rather than providing value.
Right.
And it just burnt me out really fast.
I totally understand that, man. YouTube is a pain in the ass sometimes, man. Trying to upkeep with content, and I remember too, your Redcell videos were getting a lot of comments from in Korean. Really, I mean, I didn't know what they were saying, but I knew that the comments were there. And sometimes you'll see like I'll do like a translate just to see, and they were like legitimate people asking about information. That's probably what you were talking about. And for you folks at home that don't understand, South Korea is not a firearms nation. They're not. Right. It's not in their culture. I don't mean it's not in your constitution. Firearms are generally a no-no, right? Civilians can't own firearms out there. Right. But I assume the airsoft, but it's just not in their culture. So what Jon was doing with Redcell, it was a new thing out there for South Korea. And I can see why it was very, very popular amongst the community, let alone outside of the military side. The civilians really liked it, and I can also see why the South Korean entertainment market decided to capitalize on it. That's just the way it is there. So you start the channel, you're getting deeper into the firearms industry on the Korean side, and then and where does that go from there, like, to where you are now?
So I reach out to Mike of Fieldcraft Survival because I wanted to start a conversation with the guys in the U.S. industry or guys in the industry in the U.S. And essentially, like I was saying, be a siphon of information for the Korean people. And that built up a relationship, and it allowed me to actually I'll backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
COVID happened. I don't know if I should say that for the analytics. Is probably not that bad. You could probably bleep it out. But the vid happened, and essentially what I was seeing in Korea, I'll give you a backdrop. Every Korean citizen, I'm pretty sure even foreigners included, had a QR code attached to their identity where if they walked into any establishment, they needed to scan their QR code to let the government know where they were at all times.
Oh, wow.
So that was a way to track the virus in real time, essentially in real time, for the government for the benefit of the people, right? The benefit of the people, it would track and try to mitigate the spread of the virus. I get why they would do that, but you can see the issue with that. And that became a huge red flag for me. And me being married now, again, like I was saying, married to a US citizen, I didn't want to raise a family in a country where that kind of stuff was going on.
Right.
And you have Americans that are throwing up red flags at the hint of something like that happening without even it happening. Whereas in South Korea, Korean people are very sheep-like. If the government tells you to do something, they won't bat it.
Kind of lost you there for a second.
Yeah.
Very sheep-like. That's what we heard.
Okay. So yeah, people in Korea can generally be sheep-like, and I'm not trying to offend them or offend me because I'm Korean too. It's just generally how people are because they don't want to offend others and don't want to seem like the bad guy.
Sure.
So they generally try to not stick out like a sore thumb and will follow rules to the T and point people out if they're not following rules. And again, like I get why they did that. The government did that, but it just wasn't, it didn't sit right with me. And I knew I needed to create a transition that just kind of, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me.
Sure.
And me having an American wife, I mean, she's Korean by blood, but I just had the opportunity to actually immigrate legally. So I just made that choice.
Sure. And from when you came over is when you started reaching out to Mike?
Actually, it was before that I came over. I reached out to Mike and I knew they were hiring and they definitely needed a media person.
Sure.
With the amount of media that they were doing, and they only had one guy at the time. So yeah, I reached out. Luckily, there was a position available, and it just worked out seamlessly. And yeah, now I'm here.
And this was after you two had already done the collaboration video. This was
correct. Yeah, that was.
So you
did 2 collaborations, and that was yeah.
So you already had a relationship, and that door was open, I guess.
Yeah.
Nice, very nice, very nice. And your position now, so I take it you're enjoying it, and your time back home, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, because it's a unique opportunity where I'm able to shadow Mike and not just Mike the Green Beret, but Mike the entrepreneur, and there's a lot to learn. And the company's consistently growing. I'm just glad that I was able to provide my knowledge and expertise when it comes to YouTube, because I know YouTube pretty well, and I can help you out in terms of growing your audience if you want. Because I know, I essentially grew Redcell from 0 to, I believe, 100K within like 3 months, if I remember correctly. It was very quick. There was a gap in the market, which aided in the extremely exponential growth.
Right.
But at the same time, I just knew, just kind of bullet points when it comes to YouTube. It's a thumbnail and title game, I'm sure you know. So long as you have a unique thumbnail and title that's eye-catching and your content is generally good, your channel is going to be viewed favorably when it comes to the algorithm.
Yeah, it's the nature of the algorithm game, man, which changes all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I'm not so much worried about that. The point is that the videos are out there, the interviews, conversations with y'all. It's really for the community. I don't really care about monetization or anything like that. So it's cool. It's for the community, it's for everybody, and really for you, my guests, really to give yourselves an opportunity to share your stories like this. It's like I didn't know anything like this about you. Your story's pretty damn remarkable, honestly.
Dude, I'm honored to even have the opportunity to talk, and I'm always intrigued by opportunities like this, because I'm able to actually connect with people, whereas if I'm not connecting with people, I'm just working all the time. So.
Right. It goes back to that human factor, and it's kind of like how I talked to you offline when I said that I don't try to chase after the big names that are out there. I try to find the people whose stories aren't out there, really, because that's what's important. Really, it's to show the community that we're all normal people, and with really incredible stories. A lot of us, really, especially in this industry, like we're not nothing fancy. Nobody's, and granted, your story is a lot more. A little bit more special than mine, but
oh no, not at all.
But as far as that goes, we're just everyday people, and so is the audience, and that's hopefully what can have our audience relate to you as a guest, and really to me as a host, hopefully. So, all right. So, as far as Fieldcraft for you personally, anything like that, anything upcoming events, product lines that you're working on, or goals for yourself?
There's not much that I can say.
Sure, that's totally understandable.
Yeah, so there's a lot coming along. There's a lot of events. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of products within the pipeline that's going to come out to the public. But I don't even think I have permission to even speak about it publicly, so I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Understandable, man. We'll let Fieldcraft and Mike and whoever your external folks are do that. Now, as far as you, any plans or goals for yourself for the future?
I do plan on restarting Redcell again, in a different, I won't say different format. It's generally the same format, but there were a couple reasons why I got burnt out. And again, I won't go into the weeds with that, but generally, I'm positioned uniquely right smack in the middle of the industry right now because I work at Fieldcraft.
Sure.
Not only that, I'm in the US, I'm able to shoot firearms freely.
Right. Which is always a bonus.
Yeah. I just never had that opportunity. And there was a small piece in my heart that felt very uneasy about talking about certain SOPs and TTPs with an airsoft rifle in my hand. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because it's a great training aid, but at the same time, if I'm not current, and it's extremely difficult to be current when you're not shooting all the time, which I am right now.
Right.
I'm shooting thousands of rounds every month. And I'm investing in myself essentially. because I want to stay current in my abilities and just learn the kinks of my gear and what I'm using, and just learn about new gear that I haven't used, especially in the military, and new gear that's coming out. So I'm super interested in starting up Redcell again and just providing more value to the Korean people. That's a little more fact-based rather than just opinion-based, like a little what is it? A telephone game? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that is a solid plan for Redcell, honestly. And when I first tuned into Redcell there, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, oh, it's actual vital and proper information for, I guess, for the audiences that are out there. You know, it's basically what I guess the gun tubers on the Western side, the ones that are doing it correctly, it's what you're doing for your audience over there. So it is that void that you mentioned that was there. And I hope that without understanding I guess South Korean military or special teams dynamics on their own trainings or what they're allowed to do with their when they're practicing on their own, hopefully it helps them. And in case there was ever a conflict or any type of situation, that your training or your advice might be able to help those units that are out there. So, you know, I think that's kind of the ultimate goal, right? If you can make an impact past the bureaucracy that goes on with government, because I'm sure there are things that you guys wish you had, but that you couldn't do when you were still on, you know. So yeah, no, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So I take it that when you came back and started picking up firearms again and getting back into it, that curve was a little bit different, I take it, from your military doctrine all the way back to now, I guess, American-based civilian training, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, concealed carry is very new to me because there's no concealed carry, and obviously in the military,
right?
I mean, maybe in very small applications, within certain units, but yeah, concealed carry isn't really a thing. So I guess kind of experimenting with concealed carry and everyday carry is super interesting to me. And I actually do feel the need to carry in certain instances. So that's been, I won't say fun, but it, you know, especially with yesterday's tragic event. So I do feel like it's a huge responsibility and obligation to actually do my due diligence and train myself up to the point where I can be maybe I don't know if I should say this, but be a force multiplier in terms of spreading knowledge and just kind of, you know, even amongst my family, training my wife or even friends, letting them know what's right and wrong in terms of different tactics. And yeah, I just want to provide that value to the people that I love.
No, absolutely, man. Yeah, concealed carry is a different ball game, you know. You, especially if you're used to running rigs all the time, you know, like trying to sling your rifle over to get to your concealed carry is a whole different ball game than drawing from your 3 o'clock position, you know. So for sure, man, definitely. I think that might even be interesting content for your South Korean audience whenever you feel comfortable doing that. Granted, it may not be as applicable to them necessarily, but I think that the content itself is like kind of interesting for them. Who knows? Maybe somewhere down the line, somebody might push for a Second Amendment type legislation in South Korea. For all you know, might be a while, but you know, it's some countries have done it. Like I think Czechoslovakia now has firearms in their constitution now. So,
oh, do they really?
Yeah, I believe so. A few years ago, from my understanding, they're one of the few other countries other than the United States that has firearms in their constitution. You know, so it's possible you might be that guiding force, buddy.
I hope so.
All right, cool. So given your experience and experiences and coming back in and technically you restarting your firearms ownership life, if you will, what advice do you have for others that want to get into firearms based on your perspective or in this industry in general?
I mean, nothing unique, I would say, meaning train. It's the easiest answer to give. um, like train all the time, dry fire, go to the range, find people that are like-minded that you can train with, and I guess share knowledge, and kind of compare and contrast what other people are doing.
Right.
That's the only way to build up that community and have it steer towards the right direction, rather than just being alone, in your own room and just, being a gear whore or whatever. And yeah, it's all about training, because it's the application of that gear, and it's the application of your firearm that really matters. Because if you could have the most Gucci gear in the world, if you're not able to apply it correctly, it's worthless.
Absolutely correct, man. It's cool to have gear, but if you don't actually use it, and you're not going to know what the faults are within it, right? So I mean, we see a lot of the arguments all the time on the internet about what's best, but that's very subjective. It's like, best for what? For what application are we talking about? And then at one point, there's a point of diminishing returns from what is better than the next item. At one point, does it not matter anymore about that minutia level of better? So no, you're absolutely correct. And again, if you don't test it, you're not going to know that particular sling is snagging on that piece of equipment that's hanging off your kit, right?
Yeah.
Unless you actually use it. So no, it's very true. Very sage wisdom that's basically repeated by everybody. So it's like the doctrine is true, folks. You know. So yeah, okay, awesome, man. Awesome. For folks that want to get involved in the community and stuff and doing things that you're doing, do you have any info for them?
Could you repeat that again? I don't know if I registered that question correctly.
Okay. Advice for anyone who wants to get started in your field of work right now.
Oh, okay. Military or just firearms in general?
Just whatever. Either. I probably wouldn't say military so much, because yours isn't atypical with I guess with probably most of the audience, unless you want to do that, but probably with where you are with media, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a unique perspective, because shooting media, I mean, there's been a boom in gun media, or I would say military media, or special operations media. I don't even know what to call it. And there's a lot of people that are super talented, that are able to create beautiful images, whether it's video or photo, with firearms, and just, I guess, bettering the culture. But there's a lot of LARPing involved as well, because it needs to be purpose driven. And I think the unique thing that I try to do with Redcell, and even with Fieldcraft, or subsequently with Fieldcraft, is that there's a core messaging that we try to provide, and it's all about value, adding value to the community, providing information. And if it's not doing that, and it's just a sexy image of people doing CQB, or just fully kitted out and just LARPing your asses off, there's a time and place for it, because I've created the same images that everyone else creates. But at the same time, if that's the extent of what you're doing with your media capability, it's just not helping the community at all. So if someone's interested, which I'm sure people are, because I think a lot of gun enthusiasts, whether they're training, they're always holding the camera. It doesn't need to be a sexy camera. They're always holding their iPhone or whatever phone they have. They're always filming stuff.
Right.
But if it's only to showcase their capability and not provide some sort of value to the people that are watching, why do it? So I think the why behind the media, whether it's photo or video, is going to be super important, which again, like, it speaks to what you're doing. There's a core purpose behind what you're doing, which is sharing other people's stories, which I think is super valuable, and I'm totally honored to even have the opportunity.
Happy to have you. Really. So yeah, I'm right there with you, man. You know, it's LARPing's fun. Like, don't get me wrong, it's super fun. But if you're going to do it for this purpose, and share it out there has to be a point or a context to it. You know, it doesn't exactly help if you're showing content where you're just 1% just killing it all the time, it's like sub-second splits and all that stuff. Well, if you go to my channel, you see like I post stuff about me messing up all the time and just derping around, right? And because that's what really happens in real life. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've eaten and just fall like flat on my face, running around and realizing that I probably shouldn't be wearing CrossFit shoes in like loose gravel. You know, that stuff happens, and I think you have to show, especially in this world full of fake type of personalities, is that you have to show your genuine personality, because that's what people are going to gravitate to. It's who you are as a person. Like, we can see fake, especially the folks who have been around for a while, or the folks that have been in the industry, or even the folks that are just into whatever circle of topic, like firearms, vehicles, photography, whatever. They're gonna know when you're faking it. It's just simply the way it is, you know. So I'm right there with you, John. So excellent advice there. And for the most part, majority of my content outside of these interviews here, it's filmed with a Samsung Galaxy S9. Majority of my content, dude.
Oh my God, Galaxy S9. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a few generations old, and mainly because it's the last model with an expandable memory card. Oh, that's really the biggest reason why. And at some point it's gonna die, and I'll have to update. But you know, just understand, folks, that if this is something you want to do, you don't have to get fancy. Just get out there and do it, and just be genuine. You know, I'm using an archaic phone. It's like pretty much they're gonna stop updating my OS, and it's gonna get throttled at some point. So awesome, John. Any final thoughts for the audience?
Not really. I mean, I'm just happy to have had the opportunity to kind of share my story. I don't think it's that special. I think you're just being generous.
No, it's pretty unique, and this is usually my Korean homies. It's usually the ones that go back and serve. They're already here, you know, and they're on green cards, and they've been staying here. They run businesses, they have their own lives, but you know, they get called back to go back and serve because of their citizenship status. And yours was totally unique. I did not expect that. I thought that you were here and you got called back to serve, and then you went. That's what I was expecting. But you know, super unique situation for you, man. You were already there 5 years before you had to go in. So you know, so it's super interesting. I didn't realize that. So that was a huge surprise to me. And it's also interesting to hear on the reverse side, when you're going over there, the quasi discrimination and the discrimination that you received over there, because I guess it's kind of like they almost consider you as a foreigner at that point, right? So it's pretty interesting. Previous guest Joey 9mm Musashi, he said the same thing when he was growing up in Japan, because he's half Japanese and half white, and they were basically, the Japanese over there were telling his dad to get your half-breed kid out of our country and stuff like that. So you know, it's kind of interesting that that a lot of the people here complain about racism, but they don't understand that when you're over there, we're foreigners because we're American, you know? So it's a totally different world, man. So yeah, I definitely appreciate you sharing that with myself and with my audience. And for you folks at home that don't know, so John and I had brief conversations before, but I don't know anything about him. So this is a first for me as well. So I'm just as surprised as you guys are. So awesome, John. Well, that's pretty much it for Inside the Industry episode 7, folks. Once again, my guest is Jon Park, aka Kimchi Seal. Was it Kimchi Seal on Instagram? He's with Fieldcraft Survival and the owner of Redcell Korea. If you want to check out those Instagram and YouTube channels, feel free to check out John's Instagram. You can follow along with him. And of course, John will be coming back for O.P.P to talk about his gear and equipment. Once again, John, thank you for coming on. It is an honor to have you come on and share your story.
Likewise.
Otherwise, go ahead and say your goodbyes to the audience, and then we'll go ahead and sign off from here.
Yeah, I mean, for everyone that stayed tuned. What am I saying? For everyone that watched it this far along in the interview, thank you. And I hope I provided some sort of value in terms of understanding or whatever value that my story can provide, which I don't think is a lot. But I'm super thankful, and I want to thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Check down below for discount codes in the video description with my friends in the industry, as well as several folks are out there. Feel free to go there and check them out. Do you visit them? They are really awesome companies that are out there. Of course, also, again, check out Fieldcraft Survival. Go check out Jon's locations and his social medias. If you like this type of content, if you like the video, go ahead and like the video. If you have questions for Jon or have any general comments, comment down below. Go ahead and share the video with anyone who you think it can help and possibly resonate with. Other than that, thank you all for watching. This is Inside the Industry episode 7 featuring Jon Park, Bunny Operator, signing out.